pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, then I will ask our board secretary to take roll.
Colin Brunell,
I'm here.
Lisa Johnston,
Here.
Dave Nichols,
Here.
Meredith Sauer,
Here.
Stacy Seldner, Carrie Trask,
Present, yeah.
and Kathy Willis.
Here.
Okay.
Thank you. Then I would ask for a motion and a second to approve the minutes from our February 8th meeting. You should all, can't hand them out or anything, but you should all receive those.
Yeah, got them.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any additions or corrections? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. And then we'll move on to we have one committee report from our curriculum committee. That would be you, Meredith.
Yep, so we met last week and had a couple of things on the agenda, no action items at this point, just information pieces. First, we walked through a K-12 literacy update and just walked through some of the things that are moving and shaking in the areas of literacy. One of those is that a survey was put out to the teachers and it was identified that there is a gap in our current resource, particularly the elementary aged. And so they're going to start looking for a new resource to vet through the process. And that process is pretty lengthy. That's not going to happen real quickly. And if you're just new math resource to begin this year. So we want to give our teachers some time to work through the math resource and then begin to adopt that literacy resource. So more to come on that, but just that is coming. We then looked at our achievement gap reductions, just an update, kind of a mid-year report. At the end of the year, we'll have a final report that ends up getting submitted, and this particularly focuses on Jefferson and Franklin elementary schools. With this, there was some baseline data that was taken in regard to those achievement gaps from years prior. So there was data taken in September and then some mid-year data that was presented for both schools. They track it each a little bit differently. With Franklin, there was a lot of kids who were starting below target levels in September. And I'm happy to report in a lot of those areas at different grade levels that there's been a significant uptick to being on target. So that was exciting. Franklin tracks their data in a slightly different manner. They look at standard specific and again, some great improvements going on there as well. So that data was available for the team to review and to ask any questions. And then the last thing that we looked at was just kind of an introduction to the student and parent engagement surveys that were sent out earlier this academic year. And those were just kind of informational pieces. And at our next meeting, we'll dig further into it, but just giving folks an opportunity to absorb the data, ask any preliminary questions. So we got assigned some homework that we're going to ask questions prior to the next curriculum team meeting and be able to have those then answered in a great fashion during that time frame. So that was our meeting in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you, Meredith. And then I would entertain a motion in a second to approve the curriculum committee minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions on the minutes? Otherwise, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay, those are carried. Thank you. And then we'll move on to the report of the superintendent. And the first item there is the personnel report. And Joyce, you would have that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
The personnel report would have been put in board book on Friday. And then I did ask Lori to add an addendum yesterday afternoon. So any questions on either the original personnel report or the addendum?
And the addendum fills vacant positions, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Correct,
Vacant positions, yeah.
correct.
Okay, I would entertain a motion and a second to approve the reports.
Can we go separate, please?
Okay, Colin, why do we need to go separate on that?
Because it's been less than 24 hours notice. I prefer to have notice on these things. I've said that before, so I mean,
Well, the only way to properly give you notice in order to fill that would be to have changed the date of our meeting. You realize that, right?
well, I'm not voting in favor of it, so we can go from there.
Okay.
It is only 2 names on the addendum, right, Dave? Do I
Yeah.
have that wrong? That it's literally
Right.
just 2 names? on the addendum?
They're filling vacant positions, and they would have to be, in order for them to start on the 28th, we'd have to approve it before the 28th.
Right. I was just confirming.
The
that
only
there's
other way we
literally
could
only
do
2.
that based on Colin's request would be to set another meeting date.
Just take
And
them
that
separate.
doesn't seem to be, that just makes it really cumbersome to operate our board when you make those kinds of requests, Colin. That's all I'm saying. But you know what? I'm gonna accept it. So we're gonna vote on them separately. So the first personnel report, I would entertain a motion and a second to approve.
I move we approve the first report.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, then we'll move on to the addendum. I'd entertain a motion and a second to approve the addendum.
I move we approve the addendum.
I'll second.
Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
No,
Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to budget and staffing considerations. So Superintendent Holtzman, that would be up to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen so that we're all going to be on the same page. And I believe by doing that, our audience will also be able to take a peek at what we're talking about. So I wanted to take an opportunity to share with the board some conversations specifically regarding our budget. And if I could just pause for a minute and just get a verbal yay that you can see the screen that I'm presenting and you can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
It's there,
Yep.
yeah.
If in fact along the way you have any questions, if you just click on the raise your hand, I'll hear the sound or just speak because I can't see any of you as I'm presenting here. So what I want to do is just kind of give you an overview of some of the things that we have in our budget regarding staffing. And we've talked a little bit about this in the past, but I just want the full board to hear this and to just kind of process what we have to do moving forward. So you're aware that in the biennium budget, there were no new dollars that were provided to Manitowoc Public School District or any public school for that matter for 2 consecutive years. We're in the first year of that, and we're moving forward now, planning for our budget in the second year. In order to pay our employees, then we need to find other resources to do that. And we also need to make sure that we have enough money to pay for increases in transportation, facilities, insurance, etc. So to give you a quick overview, in this case, we're just talking about compensation. Our board has talked a little bit, and we heard from the personnel committee to make sure that we look at ways we could potentially provide a market wage adjustment for our paraprofessionals. We have about 135 paraprofessionals in the district. Sometimes we call those people aides. They're working specifically with our students. We also are looking for a way to pay all of our employees, trying to utilize some ESSER 3 funding. There's 3 different levels of ESSER: ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. This is specifically talking about ESSER 3. Avoid using the school district's fund balance. We know if we pay people out of fund balance, that's an ongoing expense, and we'll continue to have to do that. And then trying to manage those effects of the salary increases on future year's budget. And obviously, one of the things that we want to try to continue to do is retain and attract quality staff. This slide here gives an idea of what a proposed market adjustment might look like. The top chart is where our current paraprofessionals are today. The bottom chart would be what our proposed wage increase would equate to. So you can see that in the first classification, we would move from $11 start to $13, and from a 15 maximum to a 16, and it goes across the board. And again, these are just recommendations. Okay, so I heard a hand up. Someone, go ahead.
Yeah, Mark, it's Stacy. I just wanted to know the proposed market adjustment. Did that, where did those numbers come from? Did we do some looking at some other districts or?
Yes.
benchmarking?
Yeah, so we try to get an establishment of where some of the, what the regional market would be. We were targeting the area in $15 an hour. What this equates to actually is a 21% increase, which is about the maximum we can afford. So when you look at, when I say it's a 20% increase, if I'm making $11 an hour and I add 20% to that, you move up to $13.37, which really is in the hourly wage rate in the public sector, not as competitive as we'd like to be, but that's still a significant rate. So we looked at area school districts and what they were providing, and then use that as a flat rate because the wage weight would go to every employee. So we had to move not just new people, but everybody, if that makes sense. We can't just say we're going to start people higher than the people who are currently here. So every employee who's a paraprofessional would receive a market increase.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, Mark, it's Kathy. Could you just explain the difference in the classifications, please?
Yeah, I'll pause there and ask Joyce to give me, because she's much better versed at what classification 1, 2, 3, 4. Joyce, could you help me out with that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't have my list right in front of me, but I can absolutely share that within the paraprofessional salary schedule, there's 4 levels. So for example, I know for sure that in level 1 are all of our classroom aides, instructional aides, playground, lunchroom aides. They're all in level 1. Level 2, probably the biggest group in level 2 is our special ed aides. There are a few other folks in there. Again, I don't have the list right in front of me, but keep in mind the special ed aides. If you're a special ed aide, you also get an additional 50 cents per hour. Level 3, let's see, I want to say our EL aides, preschool assistants. Level 4, I know, for example, are our elementary library media managers. So, there's several different positions that fall within each of those, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Is that helpful, Kathy?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on that wage piece here for our paraprofessionals and a proposed market adjustment?
Looks like Colin has one.
Okay, go ahead, Colin.
Oh, my hand must have came down. My apologies. So the as far as the wages go, are these just going to be? Are we proposing wage increases? And that's it, or are there going to be changes to the benefit structures? Anything else in that matter?
What I am doing right now is just kind of giving you an overview, and so the committees will work on that. This specific piece talks just about wage and then any benefits related to increased wages. So like FICA, Social Security, WRS, all are termed benefits. Those also go into the wage. We are not at this point talking about the amount that people pay for their insurance. at least in this conversation we have it.
And then with that, is there it's my understanding they don't have PTO. Is that correct, or do they?
Yeah, all of our employees have, accrued sick leave. I guess I would have Joyce specifically if you want like specific questions on how much they get and where they are. But yes, employees have, and it depends on, their full-time status, I suppose. If they're not full-time, they'll have less. But we don't have a general PTO bank where you take, sick and personal, et cetera. There's sick leave, and then there's other special leave. If that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
And Colin, if you want to reach out to me and know more specific, I can help you, but
Excellent.
all,
Okay.
all of our employees accrue sick hours.
Okay.
And along with other benefits, but if you want some more specifics, I can certainly help you with that.
Great. Thank you.
So guys, I did have another question. It's Kathy. So Joyce, when you explained the classifications, why do our preschool assistants and library people get paid considerably more than, say, our classroom aides or special ed aides? Do they have schooling, or like why is that such a distinction?
Yeah, likely what was done before my time was, typically in my past experience, I've not done it here for our paras, but typically what you would do is you would go through a process and you'd have criteria that would then determine, if your para position fell into a 1, 2, 3, or 4. And again, you could have criteria such as, is there any post-high school education required? You could look at any specific skill sets or technical skills needed. You could look at work, safety type things. So typically, again, I've not done it here. This was in place before I started, but typically, again, for example, with our paraprofessionals, there would have likely been, here's a list of criteria, and you rank it or you score it to determine which positions then fall within each level. So
if we're looking at increasing wages for those people, wouldn't it be prudent at least, I mean, not right now, but in these next upcoming days to like really look at that? Like, I'm wondering too, like how many paraprofessionals do we have like as library aides versus classroom, because we definitely need more classroom aides. I mean, that's kind of, but anyway, it's something to think about, like how that's arranged and how many we have. And that could affect our dollars too, of course.
Yeah. It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter how many. It really is the job they're doing, the tasks, the jobs, the skill level, any education. But to your point, Kathy, and then I'll apologize, Mark, I'll let you keep going. But I am actually looking at some of that right now, and at least to think about, are there any of our positions within our para schedule that there's merit to moving them to a different level. So,
okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
Hi.
Go ahead.
When does this go into effect? And when we run out of ESSER money, what happens then?
So, that's a great question. So none of this is going into effect. I'm not even asking
it isn't.
to vote on anything. I'm just trying to give you maybe the opportunity as a board to wrestle with the scenarios that I'm going to bring forward. And then the process would go to both the personnel and the finance committee. And then at that point, those groups would identify a potential rate. And it's a little different how we do it for our faculty, our union groups, as opposed to our non-union groups. And I'll explain that as we get through the presentation.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for the questions. Anybody else have something that they would like to talk about here right off the bat from wages and market adjustment? Okay. Again, just to kind of give you an idea then, the potential cost scenarios. And again, I want you to kind of wrestle with this. So if we make a market adjustment for our paraprofessionals, that's a $610,000 increase to our budget. Then I have 3 different scenarios here: a 2% increase, a 3% increase, and a 4.7. 4.7 is the CPI. 4.7 is what we've seen the district offer in the past, but typically that number was less than 2. And so what you see then on each bracket, each box here, is the total costs, 1.5 million, 1.9 million, and 2.5 million, 2.56 million. And what I want you to wrestle with is remember the fact that we don't have any new money. There are no new dollars that the district has right now. And if we do want to make market adjustments or pay our employees, we've got to come up with a strategy to do that. In addition to our typical process to pay people, we also have in our system an advancement in lane or step. So, for example, our teachers have ranges where they get an additional $1,800 until they reach a maximum. Our custodians would receive 50 cents every 6 months until they reach a maximum. Our secretaries would receive an additional dollar, a cent increase each 6 months as they go through their process. This proposal would not include any what we call step increments. What we would do potentially, an idea would be, is to provide a one-time $1,500 payment to all employees. Anyone who's a full-time employee would receive 3 $500 increments throughout the school year. If we use 750 as our total employees, that's $1.15 million. Now, again, the rationale behind that is this would replace the typical step area that our employees get. It wouldn't go on to their base salary for the next year. And the reason we're doing that is to try to mitigate the cost to the district down the road. And you'll see that as I explain a couple scenarios moving forward. So the additional cost is actually 1.3 million because we have to add some increased costs anytime we pay people, WRS, Social Security, etc. And then what we would do potentially is use some of our ESSER 3 dollars. So we've been allocated 7.5 million in ESSER 3 resources. We've expended some of those monies, $1.7 million for additional staff. Some of those staff went to lowering class sizes, adding counselors, our technology folks at McKinley Academy. We've added nurses. So we have a list that we estimate 1.7. We also added school days to the calendar for this school year. So there's some costs there. We would estimate that some of those we're going to continue, some of them will stop, to the tune of $1.15 million. If we move to the next piece and we use the estimate of a 3%, so I showed you a 2%, a 3%, and a 4.7. We do the paraprofessional market adjustment and one-time compensation. We would potentially need to use $3.2 million of the ESSER 3 dollars. We have, if you look on the sheet, you'll see the expenditures. $2.6 million is the year we're in right now with staff and supplies. You subtract that from 7.5 and you get $4.9 million. On the next year, we roll over 1.15 that I talked about from the staff that we have in place. We add the $3.2 million and we end up with, again, 3.75 left from 1.15 from that 4.9. If we take $3.2 million, it would leave us with $500,000 in this ESSER 3 dollars for the 23-24 school year. So this is where the challenge comes. Anytime we give an increase to our employees, it rolls into the next budget. So if you use a 2%, 3%, or 4.7%, the dollars that I'm showing you here would roll into our budget. And without really knowing what the state budget's going to provide us, we're really starting in the hole. I do anticipate that the state's going to give us, I would say on average, maybe $200 per pupil. They're not going to say no because they've given us no money for 2 consecutive years. I can't imagine we're not going to get resources. But there is some risk. I mean, we don't know that for sure. We also know that we have our last debt payment. We've been talking about this for about 4 or 5 years now. In April of 2023, that debt payment's in the range of about $1 million. So if we get $200 per pupil and $1 million of no debt payment, we would be able to afford a budget deficit of about $2 million. That's just a guesstimate, right? We have to kind of work through that process. So what I would say is if we provide our compensation, our staff with that 2, 3, or 4.7 increase and make those market adjustments, we would have some resources to do the $1,500 one-time payment. Now that $1,500 goes away on the second year, and their base would be the 2% or 3% or 4.7% increase. And again, we would estimate that we'd get $1 million more in state aid, utilize $1 million in debt reduction. That would put us at about $700,000 in fund balance in 23-24. We could choose to make reductions to that based on the ESSER things that we've put in there. We do have about $500,000. We might be able to recalculate some of those things. And this recommendation / idea would not cause us to have to dip into fund balance this next school year, next budget year, in order to pay for salaries. Anytime we dip into fund balance and use for salaries, we've got to keep dipping into fund balance unless we cut or get an increased revenue amount. So I'm going to stop sharing there and just say this, that it's just a recommendation and some food for thought. I really do want the board to kind of just get an understanding and wrestle with the idea that we've got to come up with a plan in the next 2 months at maximum, and decide what we want to do with our employees moving forward. The process would be that our finance committee and a possible process would be our finance committee and our personnel committee would have a joint meeting and have a conversation about, well, what do we think here and what does this look like? It is possible. So the teachers group is a union. And so the board could choose to go into a closed session if you wanted to share your negotiation, I use that loosely, ideas, because the board can choose to provide options that way if you feel like you want to do it in closed session. But in reality, there's 2 things that are true. We don't have any money. And I think that's the message, is that, you can't give our people who are likely working through a very difficult year and hope to attract and retain and say, well, sorry, we don't have anything. We've got to come up with some strategy. And this strategy does not take into account our fund balance. It's not unflawed, like it pushes it down to year 2, and we're hoping that we're going to get some state aid. And again, this is the first year in my career outside of Act 10 that school districts didn't get any money. So it's not common. But I guess I just wanted you to kind of wrestle with that. So I'll pause there and say any questions that people have and would like to know. Meredith and then Colin.
Yeah, so I just, I know you don't want to get down into the weeds because our committees are going to do that. I would say working for a public institution, we did this last year, where I work with the combination of stipend and smaller raise than what, 4.7, right? And it was a good plan and a good so I appreciate seeing that mix in there as well. And I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Colin.
So historically, you said that we do not, that it was a bit of an anomaly to not get state aid. Historically, what do we usually see from state aid annually?
It's a mixed bag. I would say anywhere from $150 to $200. We've gotten 75 some years. It is what likely will happen is that there's going to be an opportunity for the legislatures to use some of the money that is in this budget surplus and add that to the overall budget and give some dollars back to public education. But again, I mean, there is no guarantees, but typically, Colin, it would be somewhere between $100 and $200
Per pupil?
per pupil. Yes, they'll give that on a third Friday count per pupil allocation.
Thank you.
And it won't exceed the revenue limit, so they'll give categorical aid because that's what our legislatures do. Any other questions on that piece?
Yeah, I guess, Mark, which legislatures would we contact to try to push for aid for our schools?
Okay, so great question. So our senator is Devin LeMahieu, and he serves, he's a speaker. So always, if you're looking for emails and that kind of stuff, I can get that. And then our local, is Paul Tittle. And again, I meet about once a month with our local legislatures and share with them information in our story, and I would reach out to those two individuals. We have a few that have very small areas within the Manitowoc Public School District from the north, but for the most part, those are the two that serve our school district.
Yeah. You might be able to. You might want to send an email to Robin Voss, I think, who really determines this stuff. I mean, I think there's, Paul Tittle kind of does what Robin says to do.
Yeah, we we're not the only school.
He doesn't do
district.
what Paul Tittle says to do.
Oh, come on! They on budget stuff they vote in lockstep.
I think you're a little off there, but okay.
I beg your pardon?
The opportunity, I think, for us to contact legislatures and tell our story is great. And our story isn't different than other communities. The difference in our model is that we do have some federal dollars that we can utilize, but we're spending all of them. Like, we literally are going to spend all of our dollars on this. And on year 3, we're going to move from spending $3.2 million of ESSER dollars to $500,000. So we're going to have to make some changes. But I think the alternative is using $3.2 million or even $2 million, right? Out of fund balance is not sustainable down the road. If we do that this year, then any increase that we have means, let's just say we use $2 million. If we use $2 million out of fund balance this year, next year when we start the year, we have to take $2 million out of fund balance just to balance the budget, and that's not including any new dollars. So if we wanted to give them another 2%, and our fund balance isn't going to be able to sustain that more than a year.
Yeah, it's important to remember that whatever we give them now, aside from the bonus, we have to carry on throughout history. I mean, that's we're locked into that. So it's a definite consideration to make.
Yeah. So again, the idea would be just wrestle with that for a little while so that when you go to the committees, I think every board member is on one of those two committees, if I'm not mistaken. It almost works perfectly, right? The finance and the personnel, every board member, with the exception of President Nichols, is on one of those committees. So you all have a voice, and obviously the president can join in either if he chooses. So I'll pause there and see if there's any other questions. You have the information. I know that Angela and Joyce will work on trying to find a meeting. Go ahead, Stacy.
And Mark, just the proposal was only on paraprofessionals, right? So when you say in here all staff, like later in the presentation, are we talking just paraprofessionals, or are we talking everybody?
No, we're talking everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, great question. So the market adjustment is just paraprofessionals. The rest would be everybody. So the 3% increase would be for everybody. with the exception of paraprofessionals. So the paraprofessionals are going to get their raise and everybody else is going to get 3%. Okay. And then we would give, one option would be every employee, whether you're an hourly or a salary employee, would get 3 $500 one-time stipends throughout the year in place of your typical bump till you get to the maximum. So that would include paraprofessionals and custodians, secretaries, teachers, everybody.
Mark, what kind of deadline do we have on this, and will you send us this material? So we can print it off and.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the idea would be that the committee would review it. I would say sometime in the next few weeks. The board would act upon it. The committee, if the committee, whatever the committee approves, brings it to the full board for what we call it loosely tentative approval. Then, outside of the union group, which is the teachers group, we would pass that on to the teachers group and they would vote on it for a ratification. It's a formal process that has to happen. Then the teachers would tell us if they approve. Okay. There's a separate process if they don't approve. We hopefully will work with them and they would approve. And then the board would vote to approve the teachers' compensation first. Everybody else can follow along after is typically the process we do. And we'd like to have that. Joyce, what is the contract deadline for our staff? Is it March or May 15?
Yeah, but typically, again, to work through this process, typically we go to our MEA group. We call it our MEA negotiations meeting. We typically do that the first week of April, no later than the second week of April. Again, it's all timed out because of board meetings and, the whole process. So early April, we have our MEA negotiations meeting. So my understanding is, we have to make a decision prior to that so that we know when we go to the MEA.
Well, we need a recommendation by the second meeting in March, right?
That would be nice.
Yeah,
so that we can go to the
so-
negotiation, we can say yes, then they would take it
Right.
out to their members, and then the board would vote to approve generally what we offered, if that makes sense.
So I know that, as Mark said, so we've got some work to do in the next few weeks, really. Next week's March, I think, next Tuesday. I know that the Personnel Committee is meeting next Friday, the 4th, and I believe Angela's going to be reaching out to the Finance Committee to see if the Finance Committee can join us, for the first half hour, 45 minutes, so that we can continue conversations on this. But, Angela's going to reach out to the finance folks to see if you're available next Friday morning. And if that doesn't work, we got to get something scheduled probably the next week then. So there's kind of a tight timeline because there's a lot to do.
Right. It goes pretty quickly. If we can't get something scheduled next week, then we've got to get something scheduled the following week, right? And then we're talking about the next board meeting. So it kind of falls into, we could always have a special meeting, but I really feel like you've got the gist of it. If we need more than one committee meeting to think about it and agree upon it, we really need to get moving on it. So,
Okay.
Oh, Mark froze a bit.
Oh,
I do have
yes,
a couple questions, guys. I've had my hand raised for a bit. I don't know if you see that or not.
Yeah.
I guess I want to just clarify to make sure that I know I'm understanding this right. So we have our ESSER 3 money, which we need to decide how we're spending that. And I believe we have to have that submitted by, is it March 10th? Angela might want to hop in on this. And then I thought that we also had to have some sort of public, when I say public input, I don't mean like we have in our regular meetings, but like some sort of community group, people involving different kind of walks to help determine or have some sort of say in that. And are we talking about, I mean, we've been talking about using these ESSER $3 for these increases, correct? That's what we're talking about. So if we are not determining this until like April, how do we get around this March 10th deadline? Is that too many questions at one time? Mark, were you able to hear any of that?
No, I'm sorry, I lost the power here, so I'm streaming on
Oh.
my so kind of doing back.
You left your
sorry.
vacation too. My questions were kind of like, it was kind of like all interconnected and I had a bunch of them. So
Angela's
Mark-
here now though too.
Yeah.
what's that?
I said Angela's here now too, Kathy.
Oh, good. So Angela, were you able to hear that? My question?
Yes, and Mark, they were just asking about the requirements for the ESSER 3 application for the district. And just to speak to the requirements that we have to meet, that we had a series of questions just related to the safe return to in-person instruction that we had to talk about. I'm just looking at my list here that we have on an email. And then we had to engage in stakeholder input. So what we did through our staff engagement and parent engagement surveys is we asked what their priorities would be, for using the ESSER dollars. And then we're going to speak to how what we're using the funding for relates to, what we received in feedback. So which is in line. So I don't know if Mark wants to add to that.
So, but the other part of this was if we're talking about using our ESSER $3 for this, then how are we in compliance with the date? Like if we're talking about not coming up with our plan until into March, right? And then but isn't it March 10th that we have to submit like how we're going to be using those funds?
We can submit a plan and then we can adjust it as we would need to. That's just the initial deadline. The claiming period for the grant is through September of 2024.
Oh, okay. Okay. I wasn't sure how that was working. So thank you.
Oh, not a problem.
And then I guess the last part is our state comes up with our maximum percentage increase every year. So do we know what that is right now? Or are we kind of trying to be proactive in this?
4.7%.
It'll be 4.7 this year? Ooh,
It is.
where last year it was quite low.
Is under 2.
Yeah.
Typically, it has been. Yes.
So
That's why there was 3 proposals: a 2, a 3, and a 4.7.
Okay. All right. That clarifies everything for me. Thank you.
Kathy, we usually find out, Angela or Mark, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, we can kind of monitor what that CPI is going to look like. And then I want to say it's by mid-January
Oh.
that they say this is what it's going to be.
Oh. Okay.
And that's at 4.7.
I just thought I remembered it being later last year, but honestly, a lot of things are a blur and you don't remember the schedule for it all. So I didn't realize it was that early. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah. I appreciate everybody's interest in two pieces. Just to Kathy, 2 of the areas that both the parents and our staff agreed upon was attract and retain quality staff members and reduce class sizes. And then there were some mental health pieces. I think we definitely will be in compliance. I think just the question remains is the board has to wrestle with, do we want to pay our people? If so, how much? And how do we want to use the money? And so if we choose to go differently, that was where the committees would come in. Maybe the finance would have some opinions that might be a little different than personnel, right? Personnel might be talking about, yep, we want to do this, and finance as well. We only have this much money. So the idea is just board wrestle with it a bit. And then as we get closer we've got about a month to really come up with a plan. Go ahead, Stacy.
Was ESSER earmarked for anything? Or can we can use it for wages?
So we can, I mean, they'll say very specifically what you have to use it for.
Yeah.
But wages in theory is not one of the qualifications, but retaining staff is one of the areas.
Okay.
So one could argue a bit about we're trying to retain staff.
Yeah, sure. Okay, great. Thanks.
If you're paying people like the wages we did pay for like nurses, smaller class sizes have to be geared towards mitigation of strategies for learning loss. So, there's some other pieces in there. It could be health. So Chris has some resources in the buildings and grounds that are looking for air purification and efficiency. And so that's where some of the ESSER II dollars are going towards. So, there's technology would be another piece. When we went to one-to-one, what does that look like? So we were able to claim some of that. But there isn't a line that says you can pay people, but there is some lines that they're basically set up so that you can respond to that. Okay. Any other questions on this piece?
All right, good. Mark, move on to district demographics.
Yeah, I've got one more.
You have a presentation on that too, right?
Yep, I got one more presentation. And again, this one just is trying to give some information to the board and maybe set some chart for what our future might look like. So I'm going to do one more, again, share my screen. And when I do that, I just want to make sure that the board is able to kind of see where we're at here. So again, if you have some questions about any of this information, just click in or say hi. And I can't see as I go through this, but I think there's been lots of conversation, just a little bit about the Manitowoc Public School District and who we are and where do we fall and what does it look like. And I wanted to try to provide the board with just some overview on school district and what our student enrollment looks like. And then maybe some school districts that look like us. And then in the end, I think the idea would be, what data is it that we might want to pay attention to, and what are we really specifically looking for as we talk about a great school district? So I've included these 6 areas. Enrollment obviously is the most common one we use. ED is the economically disadvantaged. CWD is children with disabilities. ELL is, we're talking about English language learners, per pupil spending, and then between district mobility. And I'll explain these as we go. But what I did is I took the top 50 school districts in this state, mostly because that's an avenue, rather than trying to compare us to, a school district that's not near us and not like us in size. I just want to try to get an idea where we are. So this kind of gives you an example. So we're 36th out of those 50 in enrollment. We're 15th in percent economically disadvantaged. We're 8th in percentage of children with disability. 13th in the percent of EL, not 13th, 13. Per pupil spending, 45, and percent mobility, 4. So to give you an idea, the largest school district in the state is Milwaukee. They're number 1. Manitowoc is 36. So we'll kind of look through each one of these to give you an idea. What I tried to do then is grab school districts in these areas that were a little bit above us and a little bit below us to see who are the school districts in our realm. And you'll see some of these school districts come back on a regular basis. And some of these school districts, you won't see their names appear in like us ever again. So the first one is enrollment. And you see that there are 10 school districts that have enrollment very similar to the Manitowoc Public School District. And there are, like I said, we are number 36 in that demographic. The next piece is economically disadvantaged. And so you can see where Manitowoc is and who we are like in terms of economically disadvantaged, from the Madison School District, which has 50%, to Waukesha, which has 37.5. And you can see school districts that are very similar to us between 50 and 44 and 42. Yep, heard a question there?
Yeah, Mark, I was wondering, do they figure that out by the, is it the lunch, the reduced and free lunch? Is that where that number comes from?
Yeah, so there's 2 different language pieces, but typically we hear free and reduced as the lunch piece.
Mm-hmm.
Economically disadvantaged is a little different. Those are what we call direct certified people. So families in our school district who are receiving free lunch and other state funding by signing up for that. So there are certain state aids that you receive that will automatically allow you to get free and reduced. So our actual free and reduced number is a little bit larger than 47% because there are some families who are eligible free and reduced who aren't eligible for state aids. this makes it universal across the system. So economically disadvantaged, their number is basically based on poverty. So the number of families, you have to sign up for it in free and reduced. Economic disadvantage, you sign up through a state service. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so like so if somebody was on Badger Care, would that be one of those pieces
That would be one of
that would
those
add
pieces.
to
It
this?
could be. Yes,
Okay.
that could be. That could be a direct certification. There are others, but that would be one of them that
Okay,
leads towards
all
that. Yes,
Thanks.
you bet. So the second slide here that I'm showing would be children with disabilities. And this is the percentage. So 16.1% of the students who enroll in a Manitowoc Public School District have identified with an IEP. And then you can see, where we are in that range in comparison. We were, I don't remember off the top of my head, but we were like number 16, 15, 13. School districts that have a few more, school districts that have a few less. But again, that's who we are. EL, again, when you look at the number of students who speak a different language or have families at home, that's 8% of our population. So again, for every 100 students we have, that's 8. For every 1,000 we have, that's 80. So that's the percentage of kids who do that. I heard a general, not a very specific, but a general statement today as we're talking about staffing in a meeting. The number of new EL students to the district is nearing 100. Not quite there, but nearing 100 for this school year from September until now. We are significantly seeing an increase in that population, families who come from somewhere else and don't speak English. So just part of the celebration and of the diversity and opportunities that we have here in Manitowoc. We've talked about this. We just got done talking about this. This is our per pupil spending rank. And again, spending is not the only indicator to student success. There's another slide that I'll show you a little bit after that shows that. But, this Hortonville was the lowest. And as you look, it's not always the case, but we are, if you go, this is 50, 49, 48, 47, 46 in those top 50 school districts. That's where we're spending. And again, the challenge as we look at probably the next biennium budget, everybody's going to get the same amount. If that's $200, and we will still stay in that same amount. So that number will be maybe $12,675, and everybody above us will get 200, and everybody below us will get 200, and we will stay at that same per pupil spending rank. I wanted to include this slide for you because it's an interesting model that talks specifically about average household income and expenditures for public schools. And so I'm just gonna add you this link and share this with you just for a brief review. And what this does is it shows each school district and your family income compared to your per pupil spending. And so there's obviously a positive correlation between the higher income and the higher spending. So if we look at school districts that are over here, it'll say, for example, Monona Grove is high income ranking and high spending ranking. If you see school district like Elmbrook has a lower spending rank, but they're number 408. Remember, Manitowoc is 60 in that spending. This is where you probably don't want to be. You don't want to be in the low income rank and the low expenditures. So as you look at a snapshot of where Manitowoc is, you don't see any school districts that are below us. Like this is, and again, this is not my data. This is the aggregate data. I found this. I'm like, holy cow. When you combine per pupil spending with the income of our family's average income, you see that there's some challenges. So just a data point, you have that access for that as well. The next piece here is the between district mobility. And so when I talked about the number of new EL students, what I will share with you is that Manitowoc on average has 5.7% of its population new to the district sometime in the school year. So, again, if we use that data point and we see that there are, almost 6 out of every 100 students who have moved in of our school district. And you can see where that district mobility is compared to other school districts. Just another point that the DPI has in those pieces. So I put it all together and tried to find, who are the school districts that are maybe more similar to us as we check the boxes as we go along. And I tried to identify Manitowoc in the middle, not necessarily because of ranking of anything. It was just the idea that who are school districts that are similar to us in terms of top 50 in enrollment, similar in ED, similar with CWD, similar with EL, per pupil spending, and student mobility. And you start to see some correlations of school districts that are pretty similar. We're often compared, we use Wisconsin Rapids as a model, and we're pretty similar in many of these areas, not in EL, definitely not in a per pupil spending, but definitely in the student mobility. So you can just kind of see some of those. Our enrollment's almost identical to Chippewa Falls, but when you look at their ED population, CWD, their EL, and their expenditures, we're not quite as close. So it is interesting when you start to look at, what are the school districts that are very similar to us, and where are we going to find that? And it depends on what numbers you want to look at. But it does provide us with just a quick snapshot of who we are. Yeah, question.
Yeah, Mark, it's Stacy. One of the, I'm wondering what it would look like if we put our academic data in there too. Wondering if we saw a school that was similar to us that is also maybe has higher academically, could we look to that school, and see maybe what they're doing differently than we are? So I don't know, is that something that we can add to this? Would you find that helpful, not helpful?
Yeah, so what I would say is, yep, I've looked at that, and I guess it depends on some of our next conversations, which would be, well, what specific data do we want to pay attention to? If we were trying to compare our school report card, are we trying to compare? And I would say you'd probably see some very similar results, some a little bit higher, some a little bit lower. But there is always, that's something that we do internally, is look at, like, where are some other school districts who are doing a really great job, and how might we find out what they're doing in order to help support that? So I think that's a fair question.
Did anybody else? You paused for a second there, Mark. I don't know if it was just on my end or on your end. So I didn't catch what you'd said.
I think you were just saying that it kind of depends on what data you want to throw in there, right? That there's a lot of options.
He's paused again, guys.
All right. I'm sorry about that. Let me see. I'm actually streaming from my phone because the Wi-Fi paused here for a second the last time. So let me see if I can jump onto my own Wi-Fi.
You're good right now.
Okay. Well, that's I'll just stop there then. If I'm good, we're done, right? Oh no, not quite.
Mark, what do you think is, I know there's a lot of debate about the report card. If we were to look at academics in comparison to these other schools, what do you think is the best measure that we have, if it's not the report card?
Yeah, I think it would be some opportunities for the board to establish. Personally, I think there's a couple of areas that I would look to. It would be attendance, our participation, like just general attendance, daily attendance in school, participation in co-curricular events, the number of students taking advanced coursework at our secondary schools. Those would be academic primers that I would say are really important. I also would say that there are some other, when I think about key indicators, and maybe I'll if you would just to bear with me for one moment here, and I'll go to the last slide, I don't know if you all have that ability. It just kind of says the next steps. I'll do one more quick share, and then if it doesn't, if I get paused again, I will. I'll go out. So not to try to avoid that, but to talk about a couple of things here. I think there's an opportunity for the board to start some really deep conversation and build a roadmap for success about what are the key indicators for a successful school district, and in this case, Manitowoc, and look to identify, I don't know, 4 or 5 indicators that we might use to determine success, and then very specifically pay attention to the data that follows that. So if I think we all would agree that student academic success is part of that. And the reason I say that is because I think we've had some conversations, whether it's about the report card or whether other data. But the question would be there is a plethora of student academic data, right? We could look at our student growth model. We could look at the number of our scores on this Wisconsin state testing. We could look at our own math internal assessments. We could look at reading assessments. So there's a lot of different student data. Colin, I'll get you in 1 second.
Yeah.
We also would be talking about something we just got done. It's like, how is the district spending our money? And do we have, are we taking care of our community's resources in a fiscal manner? I think we talk about, are we a district of destination for employees? Do we attract and retain people? Are we paying attention to that data? Are we a safe school? Do we have concerns about the safety and well-being of our students and staff? And we identify what data we're going to pay attention to that. What kind of community partnerships? Do we value partnerships with our community? So there's, I think, just some general pieces we wrap our arms around. And the board could then work through identifying what those 4 or 5 pieces might be, and then maybe pass that on to the administrators and a large group of people to work out the very specifics to bring back to the board and say, here, when we say student achievement, here are the 4 things that we're going to pay attention to under student achievement, not the 40, the 4, and then we'll measure those. So I think there's some opportunities in that area. So I'll pause there and go Colin and then Kathy.
Thank you. So I'm glad to see that a lot of those, key performance indicators are really being looked at, and maybe opened up to new ones. Would it be beneficial to just create I know that the state has their own report card and there's been really ranking in it. Would it be beneficial to create our own?
Yeah, I mean, you could call it anything. You could call it like your dashboard. You could call it your promises. You could call it a strategic. I mean, there's anything you can call it. But I guess what I'm trying to throw out there would be, we do have some pieces we've looked at, and through the curriculum committees historically we've had these identified, we call milestones of success, and those milestones outline some successes that we're working on specifically in the student area. This might broaden that and say one might be student, but I think if we're talking about, again, I just want to speak for the board, but if the board was talking about what would be an example of an outstanding school district, it likely has to be more than just student success. It has to be employee success, safety, community and relationships. We've got an $88 million budget. We've got to balance that. And so I think there are other pieces to that. And first would be overarching, identifying what those pieces are. And then second, working out the details to decide how we're going to measure those. Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, I think everything that you're saying right now, in my mind, I keep thinking, like, we've talked about doing this in the past as a board, but that we need to set goals as a board and have those kinds of conversations. Like, who are we and where are we going and where do we want to go? I think that's really a key, because we need a focus. In the last 2 years, focus has been COVID and getting through it, right? But I think it's time that we kind of like really decide where we want to move forward and what are what's most important for our district? You know, what do we see? So I hope we have a chance to start having some of those conversations. But we have to chew, like you were talking about chewing on it before. We need to chew on that and decide, you know, what do we want as a board?
Yeah. Well, I like what you're saying about that. Just give me a minute. At the convention, there was a session I was in where they talked about strategic planning, and they also talked about it at the same time as they were talking about evaluation of superintendent, etc., evaluation of programs, etc. And right now we really don't have a plan, setting criteria or goals or anything like that we can then evaluate in a very specific and concrete way. I mean, I think our criteria right now are kind of vague. I think it's like, well, vague and subjective. And I think that if we did get a kind of a model, like what is a really good school system? What are they doing? What are the qualities of good there? I mean, I'd really be eager to work on something like that in order to get us, and then peel back and be realistic about what's happening in Manitowoc and who Manitowoc is, what kind of money we have, etc. And really start to think about, okay, how are we going to move this ship, down the river, and to really have specifics, to have realistic specifics rather than vague subjectives. And I think that we would be a much healthier place if we did that.
Yeah, you were mentioning the superintendent evaluation, but I really view this more as like a board. Mark, you've mentioned before, it'd be interesting to evaluate ourselves as a function of a board, but we need to decide who we are as a board and where we want to move forward. I think that's, we need to evaluate ourselves too. And maybe not literally, but we really need to think about who are we and how can we move forward and what's best for our kids in this district, right?
Yeah. So I don't know if some of you may have been through strategic planning. I assume Meredith probably has, but it is a pretty soul searching process, and I think it does generally produce good ideas in many ways. Sometimes really good planning in other ways, and I think that might be something. I mean, I think, Al, we should have a retreat. I mean, I just think that if we could do that and not just take care of business all the time, if we could really get together and share our minds, and not have to be looking over our shoulder at somebody who's coming up with with on the stage with something to hammer us with. I just think that we could be truly a very creative group, and so anyway, I basically said what I want to say.
Go ahead, Colin.
So as far as the retreat goes, if it was annotated on the agenda that was what we were going to be working with and talking about, I'd be willing to participate in that. I won't go with blanket agenda items. So just as long as it's specifically says on the agenda what it is we're doing, and then I'd be willing to be participating in that.
Yeah, I think it would be great to get together and just have like some bonding experiences, right? So that we can try to be a unified front. Because honestly, we should all be here again for our kids and the employees. I mean, that's part of what trickles down to our kids, right, in our district. So the only way we're going to move forward is if we can bond together with some common ideas and push those forward. But we have to decide what those are.
Well, yeah, I mean, we all come with different ideas and different expectations and goals. But I think that we're all grown up people. We can hammer things out, I think.
Yeah, I think of it as an opportunity.
Okay, Stacy?
You know, what might be helpful is that, so this doesn't get lost, is there an appropriate committee we could kick this to, that keeps it on the radar, that can explore what that might look like, and present something to the board of when, where, you know, because I mean, a strategic plan is about incorporating employees, and it's about incorporating Mark, and
Exactly.
you know, it's always good to have someone facilitate that. Do we want to carve out money out of the budget to do that, and things like that? So I think we should be strategic about having a strategic planning session, and you know, maybe one of our committees could explore that. I'm just not sure, or the executive committee or whatever, just suggesting, you know, who might take the baton with that.
Throw it to the executive committee, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the executive committee is the place to house that coordination.
Yeah, I'll just say we're really getting away from the agenda. Speaking of the agenda, just so you know, we're way off topic here. I mean, I appreciate the conversation.
And that's good, Dave, I think.
I clearly appreciate it, but no.
Well,
Sure.
I think
I
it's-
think we all get it. I mean, I get it. I hear what you're saying. So
But I
let's,
think
if nothing else with the district demographics, then let's move on to the foundation donation.
Yeah.
Mark, you have that?
Yeah, I do. I'll just, if I could just close with, I will have a conversation with President Nichols for setting the agenda in the future. And I definitely want to bring this back to the board. So we'll do that. And then at the next board meeting or whenever we meet again, if we decide to send it to the committee, we'll do that. But I think this is important work. And the quicker we can have some conversations about what the board wants to pay attention to and value, the better off we'll be. So I'll work on that. Thank you for your attention. Okay. I will ask you to take a look in board book. There is a donation, and Angela can help me here a little bit. Historically, the Manitowoc Public School District partnered with a number of community agencies to build and update Ron Rubik Municipal Field. And some of the donations that we accepted were over a period of 3 years. And we have completed the project and paid for it. And those monies then are going to the our help me out here, Angela, our foundation. Thank you. And
Yes.
the foundation is now giving that money back to the district.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So it was earmarked for the Ron Rubik Municipal Football Field by donations. The project was completed and the district paid for that project. The donations continue to come back to the foundation, and the foundation is now taking whatever was in that group, that coffer, and giving it back to the district. And so technically we're asking the board to just approve the receipt of the donation.
Right.
Go ahead, Stacy.
I'd like to make a motion that we place the 91 million.
Thousand. I wish it was million.
91,701.14 cents donation from the Manitowoc Public School District Foundation on this month's Board of Education. Put it into our, is it general fund we put that into, or?
Yes.
So I'll make a motion that we accept that.
I second.
Dave, you're on mute, but I think he said he's taking a vote.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I have a question. So in the when it goes to the general fund, is that just become part of our regular funds then, or does it have to be earmarked specifically?
It doesn't have to be. The money that was spent essentially came out of the general fund, right?
Okay.
And
All right.
we paid for it. So that's where it's just really going back to. We raised quite a bit more than the 91,000 from contributions. This is just a more or less additional funds that they had from contributions, but a significant amount of the money raised was through outside contributions for the Rubik Field. So yeah, that's where it came out of, Colin, and that's just what it's kind of replacing.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Okay. Then I have no unfinished business. We'll move on to new business. Public input policies and procedures is on the docket. And the reason for that is public input has caused a lot of disturbances in our meetings over the past year. It's becoming a safety issue for our attendees, both those that are speaking and those that are not speaking. I've noticed that there's been, back and forth talk between the parties. It seems like people sit on whatever side that they're supporting, and it's not become a good thing. And then with the individual coming up on stage, that's a threatening act. I did have some conversations with law enforcement. I'm not real interested in having security provided at our meetings. I don't think that's appropriate in a school. And so what I would like to see is that we perhaps put public input on hold for a while until we can feel as though it's a safer environment. So that's the discussion.
Yeah, if I was to give my 2 cents, I don't feel as though people are coming with anything new, and we tend to be just addressing this, hearing the same things over and over again. And it's not required that we do it. So to just suspend it for a while and give us a break, I don't see an issue with that. I wouldn't mind the break myself, especially knowing some of the things that have been taking place.
Well, the public has multiple venues to communicate with us. It's not the only one. It's just that this one has clearly caused problems between a lot of it is with the attendees. While they may be speaking to us, I know there've been issues with attendees, and that's just not fair to have people come in. And again, it doesn't matter what side you're on. I'm concerned that one of these days a fight's going to break out, and that's not a good thing. And the advice I got from law enforcement was either to go virtual or to bring security in. And I don't like the idea of having to bring security. That's a threatening act by itself, in a way. Assuming that there's going to be problems, and so you got to have these security guards. I know I've been to many locations in the last year or so where there's been security, and it's what they choose to do. I prefer to stay away from that.
Yeah, it's not a good feeling.
But anybody else have anything? Yeah, Colin.
Excuse me. So I'm a very big proponent of public input. When I sat on, hello. Oh, I just got feedback on mine. Sorry. So I'm a pretty big proponent of public input. When I sat on city council as an alderman, there was several times where I walked into a vote, and I had my viewpoint and mine made up a certain way. And listening to the public input, I ended up actually changing my vote. And the reason for that is I heard what the people wanted to be done. I don't really, when my role as school board, I don't really look at it as I'm going to be the captain of the ship and deciding that this is the way things are going to be. I really do look to the guidance from our community in how I vote on things and how I bring things up. I think that I have no interest in shutting down public input. There are people that really appreciate it, and it does go both sides. There are people that disagree with me and call me out on things in public input, just like people that disagree with other people that are on the board and are called out in public input. And I welcome that. I really do, because I think it is an opportunity where people can be held accountable. You don't get emotion in text. So if they are feeling upset or they're feeling happy, you don't see that in written word as easily as you do with somebody sitting there in front of you You know, we saw one time where a previous teacher, you know, they felt bullied. They were crying. We wouldn't have seen that. This was an opportunity for that person to really show their emotion in how they felt of a certain situation. And I don't think that shutting that down and saying no to that public input would have afforded us the opportunity to really see the impact of what that person was experiencing in a written letter. So I think that we should maintain public input. And if it requires having security, if there are concerns of safety or anything else of that matter, or, you know, we don't want to have hecklers, or we want to maintain some order. I understand that, but I do think that if that's the case, that those are the concerns, then we have individuals there that, you know, hey, you're going to have to be excused from this meeting because we can't have that. So I just feel that this is an opportunity for the public to speak, and we should encourage the public to participate in the happenings of the board, not look to steer them away from it.
All right, Stacy, you are next with your hand up.
Yeah, I wouldn't support taking a break for many of the reasons that Colin said, but I would, if it's concerning to people. You know, everyone has a different view of threatening. You know, and so it doesn't matter. But if we're going to do something, I would ask us to be creative and do something different. But to eliminate it or take a pause, I wouldn't support that. Two things I thought of. I saw this done at another school district where if the meetings were virtual, the one person would come on at a time, you know, so there's not an audience there that's you know, getting worked up about who's up there, but at least the person's they were able to speak. So they just be another box right here. They're able to say what they say, and then they're done after 5 minutes. And if there's anything controversial, you know, you can control their mic, you know, things like that. So that's one idea. The other thing is that we would accept letters or written correspondence, and those would be read at the meeting during that time where we would take input. So I'd like to see us change it if that's what people want to change it, but not eliminate it for a period of time.
And Stacy, I'll get done with the discussion here or the comments here, but my motion would more or less address your concerns. It's not, you know, the elimination, it's looking at it in a different way for now. So, you know, unfortunately, the reading part, I tried doing that at one meeting and got shouted down, so that didn't work real well.
Yeah.
To recall. Kathy, you were next, I think, on the list. Here, I got Kathy and then Carrie.
Yeah.
There we go. You know, again, I just want to say that so much of what we hear, though, is a repeat. Like, very, very few times do we hear anything different. So, you know, if we just took, like I said, a break, but a break could mean simply a meeting or two. But just to have the ability to just communicate as a board only and to hear from outside sources in a different way, I don't think would be eliminating anyone's chance. I know what you're saying, Colin, because of course I know who you're referring to, but it's just we just hear so much of the same thing over and over again. And, you know, it's come to our attention that people are feeling uncomfortable within the seats, even with those around them. And so when we start talking about safety, we're not talking about just the board, we're talking about the people who are also attending. And I think we have an obligation for safety first. Just that's the thought.
Okay, Carrie. You were
Yeah,
next.
well, you know, democracy is a messy system. And in lots of ways, we sort of get what's in the community, I think. And generally, I'm in favor of public input. I certainly like to hear other people's ideas, and I like to know what's making the wheels squeak and all of that. And I think that's really good for us. However, in this case, it's an organized, concerted effort to exert a bullying pressure on the school board to attempt to intimidate, attempt to disrupt, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that honestly, that's not what public input is there for. If people are just presenting ideas, presenting grievances, presenting points of view, et cetera, I think we have an obligation to allow that to happen. I don't know what our policies do, whether they must allow us to suspend this. I do think for now, a timeout might be really constructive in the way that, okay, and I think we need to make our expectations of what public input is supposed to be completely transparent and available. I mean, I just don't think I want to put up with this bullshit anymore. And that's not democracy, and it's not constructive. And again, like you say, Kathy, we hear the same thing over and over and over again. It's like a battering ram. It's like a verbal battering ram. I don't think that public bodies that are deliberating for the good of the society have an obligation to take that, to tolerate that. So I don't know if it takes a cop. Maybe it takes a cop, but maybe a timeout, and some kind of public statement, like we make about suspending the masking mandate, might be a good idea. That it's just like, come on, you got to act grown up if you're going to do this stuff.
Okay, Meredith, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I do think that public input is a valuable thing and it needs to happen. I'm not sure that's the avenue because, in my opinion, what it has done is led to disruption for the entire rest of the meeting. So we're unable to get our business done in a timely manner. And to me, that's a huge issue. I also touched base with the 3 youth who were present at the last meeting, and they were all nervous and scared. And to me, that is an unacceptable environment for them to go into one of our buildings and feel that fear. So, maybe there's some middle ground. Maybe we meet virtually for the next few meetings and it's allowed. But to me, it goes hand in hand with also conducting the rest of the business, which public input recently has really gathered a group that has had a concerted effort. And some may deny that, but there are others who witnessed that effort being planned prior to the meeting, this last one. So perhaps we need to look at a different model of public input.
Kathy, I'll let you speak, and then I'll go to the motion thing, because then we'll still have discussion after that once I make a motion, right? So go ahead.
Just really something quick to note, though, is now that we have made mask optional, like the actual public input could change quite a bit too. I mean, masks have certainly been a large majority of what we've been hearing about for a while. So that may actually change at our next meeting. So again, may change the equation of what we've been hearing and dealing with.
Okay. I would like someone to make a motion that we suspend the rules to postpone public input until such time as we can provide a safe venue for it. And what I would, and just to add to that, not really part of the motion, would be, I would like you to give me feedback on what you believe could be a safe venue for us. Whether it's virtual, whatever the deal is, whether it's security. So that would be that. I'm going to make that motion and I'll ask for a second. Is there a second to that?
I'll second
Somebody
it.
has-
I'll second it.
I'll second it.
Okay, then we can have discussion on that. And again, I'll be the first one to make the discussion because I made the motion. I would like, again, I'd like you to provide me feedback on what might be a safe venue. If we can come up with an idea for a safe venue, Stacy had an idea, I think that is
probably workable, you know, then I'll strongly consider bringing it back. I'm not so concerned with the comments that we get. That's people's right. I mean, I'm a big supporter of the First Amendment. People have the right to say whatever they want. It's the disruption that I'm concerned with. We've had to stop 2 meetings already. We did have someone attempt to come on the stage. We've had people bring backpacks into our meetings. Those are all threatening gestures, potentially threatening. We know that there have been government meetings that have turned into violence. I don't want to go there. I don't know what someone is thinking when they come in or what they're thinking after they hear inputs. So I'm concerned about that. But again, I would just, if this motion was approved, it doesn't mean we're going to eliminate public input. I want it to be in a safe venue. So I'll open it up for discussion.
I would be open to having either virtual meetings, or, as much as I agree with you, Dave, about bringing in, you know, authority with security. If we were to meet in person, I think having 1 or 2 people there would be, I think people would feel safer. Not just us, it's also about people who are attending.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to a number of schools where they have security.
Yeah.
You know, and
I don't like it. I mean, I wish we weren't even having this conversation, right? That we didn't have to go there. But I mean, the fact remains, it's not just our board that's dealing with issues of violence. I mean, the violence across the nation has increased. You know, we're aware of so many things. So I think we need to be more proactive before something does happen, whatever that means. But I'm pretty open to anything. I don't want to shut down public input.
Okay.
It just needs to look different.
Meredith.
Yeah, I would agree with Kathy, and I'd be more inclined to meet virtually just so that we can conduct the meeting business, which seems to get interrupted much of the time.
Anybody else? Otherwise, Colin, go ahead.
Oh,
Colin,
you have to unmute, Colin.
Yeah. All right. I'm not in favor of shutting down any public input. You know, if there's a desire to be virtual, then, you know, then be virtual. We've had some of the people in the past from the board participate virtually. Then, you know, we could put them on a screen so that they can look like they're present just like anybody else is. You know, I guess if it needs be that you know, in order to maintain public input, I mean, I'll sit in the boardroom and, you know, give people the opportunity to talk. I just think that hearing people and, you know, giving people a voice in their school district, it's important. And not everybody has a computer, not everybody has internet. You know, these are things that we need to make the meetings available to everybody. And actually, I think those are actually even dictated by law, that, you know, we have to have open meetings. So I guess even in that regard, can we even do this? I know that it's been said that we don't have to provide public input or don't have to allow public input, but I do think it is an important part of our meetings. And it sounds like there's an agreement in that area. I liked Stacy's idea of, you know, maybe even just offering it up so that you'd have a box where a person could provide it from a screen, but then we need to set aside a spot for that person. You know, if they don't have computer and internet at home, that they can maybe go to that and still provide that input. Because those are, you know, we need to keep it, you know, there's the word equitable that's often used. Keep it equitable. So,
Colin,
everybody-
the virtual format does allow for that to occur, for, you know, people to speak and only have that portion where they would come on. Because I do a lot of virtual meetings and I know we can do it.
Can we set it that where somebody can go to a location and it is open to them? Because
Yeah,
if
we
it's
just-
not,
yeah,
I mean,
we
if
just
it's we're
open
just
to
trusting on
individual.
their resources,
Yeah, like one
then
at a time. Yeah, they could provide
They
input.
would also have the
Session.
option of writing a letter, right? They would still have the option of writing a letter, just like they always have been if they don't have internet access.
They
they
could
do, but we shouldn't
do
limit
that
them.
too. I mean, that's what I'm looking for is ideas, right? I'm not supportive of eliminating public input. Yes, it's not required, but I think it's valuable. I support the First Amendment. People have the right. That's why I'm not concerned with the type of comments we get, whether they're redundant or not. That's what people want to do. I mean, some people will keep telling you the same thing till you get what you want, you know, and that's not the issue for me. The issue is the disruption and the fact we've had to shut down meetings, that there has been problems between attendees back and forth, that we have people coming that feel threatened, that, you know, all those things are not conducive, and we should do something about it. If this were happening in the classroom, right? I mean, the teacher shouldn't allow that to occur in the classroom. Well, we're part of the school, so I'm just trying to correct that. And it may be that I haven't thought of the right way to do it, and you might have a better idea. And some of the ideas you're giving me, I like. So that's where that's at. Let's see. Lisa has her hand up.
We had public input at one time when we were virtual, and it seemed to have worked out just fine. So are we able to go back to that? And I remember that was about a year ago that we were able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the virtual format has the capability of allowing outside people into the meeting for their input. And then when they're done, they would leave.
And I know it was a phone call. Mark, were they calling into the district office?
Is Mark still on here?
Yeah, yes, I'm here.
Okay.
We organized that. They had to register, and then they got a number and called in, and then Lori would kind of man that system. So, I mean, whether we use that system or another one, I mean, we're here to help in any way we can.
So guys, could we, like, our next meeting, just, I don't know, if we have to agree at some point, right? Just say, let's go virtual with the public input as a call or in face, however we want to do that. And try it that one time, but also address it again just to see if that really worked.
You know, my motion allows for that because all we're doing is postponing it until we can provide a safe venue, right? So that doesn't mean that public input won't take place at the next meeting. So, Colin, you had your hand up, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
So seeing as how, you know, one of the things Kathy had just brought up was, you know, it's very possible that, you know, the majority of the public input has been towards masking. And we just had the district, you know, set aside the mask mandate. It's very possible that this might be a totally different atmosphere.
Right.
So maybe we're making a mountain out of a molehill and really don't need to even look at public input the same way. Maybe it could be, you know, and so with that, you know, to keep all parties that are interested in here in what their interest is, then you know, if the safety is a factor that is a concern, then just, you know, let's have an officer at the meeting. We have business as usual, and if we just deem at a later date that we don't really need this, then we don't need it, and then we can just dismiss it. We're not reinventing the wheel. It just might seem that might be a nice, easy solution to meet the needs of everybody and keep it civil.
Carrie, you were
Yeah,
next.
civil, that's a good way to end, because I tell you, we've had a, an absence of civility. And the thing that disturbs me is not what people are saying, but it's kind of the mob nature of the gathering. And I think that they kind of incense themselves, on this one. And it's planned out, and it's they show up with the right color shirts on or whatever. It's just, this is a sort of a mob thing. It's not a public input thing. And I think the thing that really threatens them, I mean, we can't like just pretend that isn't there, Colin. I think that's why people feel insecure, feel somewhat threatened, because of the lack of civility, the sort of the bullying nature of most of the attendees. I just don't think we should have to deal with that. I don't think it's healthy. I think, you can't talk about this as if like, oh, gee, we're just getting ideas here. We're getting much more than ideas.
Okay, Stacy, you're next.
Yeah, I would prefer to meet in person and do a hybrid session. So if the people on our board don't feel safe, or the community doesn't feel safe, that they have that option. Very similarly to what Kathy did at our last meeting. And if at that time in a, in a live session, if we feel like at that point we need to change how we're doing public input to a letter, like Mark said, where we read, I'd be okay to that. I would prefer, though, a hybrid meeting rather than it going all virtual for a period of time.
Meredith.
Yeah, I think, Dave, your proposal just ended with whatever a safe option may be. So, maybe that's up to the executive committee to determine that closer to the date and be able to get the feel of that and what options may be available, just given this input today. I have tried the virtual thing and I was not able to be heard. So my concern would be if we do that and we have some folks on the board who are online that potentially they are unable to communicate. I know Kathy had a good experience. I had a different experience when I needed to do that. And so with sometimes just not having that as reliable as possible, I think, again, we have heard each other and we've actually gotten business done today. I think this virtual mode with that public input being available by phone is a good idea. Everybody has an opportunity then to give input. And quite frankly, the rest of the business, the public is not interacting with the rest of the business, and they can then watch the live feed or they can watch it as a recording later. Again, they would not have that interjection or interaction. So to me, virtual makes a lot of sense at this moment in time.
Kathy.
Just a quick note, as you were talking, Meredith, it reminded me, one of the issues that we've had with our in-person meetings, particularly at Wilson, is that people don't feel as though they can hear us. At least with the virtual setting, people are definitely hearing us, and especially because we do, our voices are louder, clearer. They can see us more clearly. Something to take into consideration anyway is that that's one of the issues that our public has had.
Okay, doesn't look like anybody else has any hands up. Do we understand the motion? It's to suspend the rules and to postpone public input until we can provide a safe venue for it. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't eliminate public input at all unless we can't provide a safe venue. Meredith, I'll let you just.
Yeah, I just had a question. Does it really suspend the rules if it's in the board policy that can be waived already?
That's why we have to suspend the rules.
Okay,
because we have
even though it says
we shall provide public input. The only way we can bypass it is to suspend the rules.
Gotcha.
And it has to be for a specific purpose, which is what this is to postpone it. It doesn't, we're not eliminating public input. That would have to be done, action by the board to delete a bylaw or change it.
Gotcha.
That's what it is.
Thanks for the
Okay,
clarification.
okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
I think nay.
I think Colin, you're nay. Okay. So am I correct? Are we 5-2?
3.
Lisa, aye. Kathy,
I said aye.
No, I
Carrie,
said,
Meredith?
I think
Meredith,
I'm
you're on,
going nay.
you're on mute too, it looked like.
Right. I said aye because my assumption was
Okay.
that.
Okay, and Kathy, you said aye?
No, I'm saying nay, because I think I'd like to give
Yeah,
this
I
a
couldn't tell you
shot.
Okay, so motion passes 4-3.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right, so then let's move on. Again, if you have input for me on that, I'd really appreciate it because we've got, 2 weeks to make a decision on what we do at our next meeting because that would be where we would normally provide public input. Let's see, spring primary election results. Superintendent Holtzman?
Yeah, so just wanted to make sure we always address the spring primary election results. We put that on the website. Last week, Friday, we drew names there's actually a formal way that they talk about that position on the ballot, and that was done. And then the board, all of our incumbents will move forward to the April election. So just wanted to make sure we had that on the agenda and let folks know that as we get that evening, we'll also update the results as we receive those from the city and municipalities.
Okay, then future meeting dates. I guess personnel and finance are discussing having meetings shortly, correct?
Yeah, personnel has a meeting on the 4th.
Okay.
And-
I know finance is talking about perhaps joining that meeting.
Correct.
Yeah, we're talking about having a meeting in conjunction with them, a time that we all meet together, and then separately, whatever we can work out, but probably on the 4th.
Okay, what about Lisa, anything for building and grounds?
Not that I'm aware of.
And Meredith, curriculum, you just had a meeting?
Yeah, we just had a meeting. We'll meet after our next regular meeting.
Okay, otherwise our next regularly scheduled board meeting would be Tuesday, March 8th. Anything else?
Our ad hoc behavior committee will be meeting again on Thursday at 1.
1 o'clock, okay,
Make everyone aware.
got it.
Hey, Dave,
And otherwise, I'd entertain a motion and a second to adjourn.
Colin,
Colin, before we take that motion?
so hey, I got, as far as the behavioral ad hoc, can I make sure that I'm getting, I listen to those. I don't necessarily, I haven't been really speaking in them, but I do listen to them just to kind of to see what the committee's thoughts are. Can I get those, be included in those meetings being sent to me?
Well, you have to I can send you the link, but I can't invite you because it's a non-board committee. So I'll just send you the link.
Okay,
You'll get the
Thanks.
same, it's the same link. I just can't put you on the invitation list.
that's fine. Just
So it's the same one that I sent you in the past. You'll get the regular link for the meeting. It's just I can't invite you.
that's fine.
Yeah.
I just want to
So
be invited.
I'll-
I just want to have a link.
I'll just
Yeah.
copy and paste it and send you the link again.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, again, motion to adjourn, motion and a second to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, opposed, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Good.
Travel safe if you're going anywhere today.